I'm Chris, and today we're going to make an edge joiner slash taper jig. Let's do this real quick. One of the first things I want to do is decide what piece of plywood I'm going to use. In this case, I'm using a scrap piece of plywood. Actually, it's a piece of a very old cabinet, and I've actually made a lot of things out of this cabinet. It's actually finished on one side. I'm going to put that side down towards the table saw because it'll give me a nice smooth surface for this to ride against. So once I've determined that, the next thing I want to determine is how wide to make this piece. That is kind of determined by what size pallet wood or what size wood in general. I'm going to go a little bit larger because in the future I don't know what I'm going to be using. And I don't want to have to make another one of these. So at least for right now, I know I'm going to be using like 5.5 to 2.5, 3.5 pieces. The other thing I have to keep in mind is the clamps we're going to be making. I need to make them long enough to fit. So I can generally make them as long as the piece of plywood I'm going to be using. It's pretty simple. This is just a scrap piece of plywood again from the same cabinet. I'm going to go ahead and cut the width of my miter gauge slot, which is about 3/4 of an inch. I'm going to make it a hair larger just so I can trim it down to get a really nice fit. And then I'm going to go ahead and trim it down to a depth of about 3/8 or so. And that should go ahead and fit in there nice and tight, but not too tight. It'll slide nice. It's just below the depth here, and that should work out good. What I'm doing here is simply placing, at least for me, 2 dimes, 2 dimes, 2 dimes, 2 dimes, and 2 dimes, just to raise this up a little bit above my table saw, so that when I go and glue this to it, 1, I won't glue everything down to the table saw, and 2, it's going to leave a little bit of gap at the bottom of the miter groove, just so everything slides nice and easy. But wherever this is going to glue to here, I'm just going to sand that up just so I have a nice bond. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and glue this down. What I did here was push the board right up to the blade with my fence. Then I sent my fence back about a 1/2 inch, a little bit more than 1/2 inch. Probably more like 5/8 of an inch. Only because the distance from this edge of the miter slot to the blade is 5 inches, but on the opposite side it's 5.5. I'm going to be using this either on this side or on this side, depending on which one I want. So I want to make sure it's definitely going to fit on this side. And obviously if it fits on this side, it will fit on this side. Hopefully that was clear. I want this board to fit on both sides of my table saw, regardless of which one I want to use. And I'm using my fence to square everything up for myself while the glue sets. And I'm also going to put a little bit of weight on here, just to help gluing it together. While that's gluing, we'll work on the other half of the project. Now to make the clamps, I'm going to make them almost as wide as the board that I'm using. Just going to kind of mark that off. I already pre-measured it. Now the shape I'm going to use, you can either have a straight or a rounded piece here. It doesn't really matter, as long as it can rock a little bit. And you want this to pretty much be the thickness of the boards that you're going to be joining together. So you can kind of just pick whatever you think you're normally going to work with. I'm probably never going to go too thick anyways, and I can always make these again if need be. Now, I'm not going to get overly concerned on how good or bad this looks. It doesn't really matter. And then on the other side, I kind of just want something that's going to be able to hold the board nice in place. I'm going to cut that one out first, transfer it to the other side, and then make one more. And then I'm simply going to transfer that to the other piece. I simply just want to decide where I'm going to drill the 1/4 inch hole for the bolt. I'll just line it up in here, mark it on here, also mark it on here, which it really doesn't matter too much, but we'll go over that in a minute. Now let's go drill some holes. Now what I want to do is drill 1/4 inch holes into these clamps. Now go ahead and space these out however you want. I did it symmetrical. It doesn't really matter too much. As long as you make a mark, and then we're going to transfer that to the other side so we can drill our holes. I measured 3 3/4 up because that's where I drilled my holes. I'm going to make a line here, and then I'm going to measure my distances over so I can drill my holes. I'm going to go ahead and drill a hole with a Forstner bit about the depth of the head of the bolt that I'm using. Now I can check to make sure. So this is the underside of my piece. We're going to drop the bolt in like this, and I use the Forstner bit just so that this bolt is going to be kind of countersunk in the wood. There's no way it's going to touch the table saw, and we'll go ahead and drill the rest of that 1/4 inch for the bolt. And now to assemble. Simply slide the bolts in from the bottom. What I might do is put nuts down here just so that there's no way these are going to loosen up and fall through. But for now, I'm going to go ahead and install my clamps. And then put some wing nuts on top. I could also put a washer down there too. Now the way you use this is, you take your rough piece of wood, this is from a pallet, you're going to slide it in place. Slide it just to the blade or just past the blade, depending on how warped this piece is. Tighten down the wing nuts. And run it through. Simply slide the board out, remove your jig, bring your fence in to where you need to cut it. Now since we made this side nice and straight, this side can go right to our fence. We can run this piece through. And if you really want, you could get your crosscut sled. And you end up with a very usable board for a more precise project. And that should give us a perfectly joined edge. Compared to that, you can see you got gaps in it. I'm Chris, and thanks for watching. If you liked this video, thumbs up and subscribe. Don't forget to tell your friends and share this video. And definitely check out some of my other videos.